Hydraulics. Now that can be a giant category relative to designing pools, and it's a whole career path. We have an hour and 45 minutes, and I want to allow time for interaction. So this is sort of, I'm going to focus this on applied hydraulics. We're all dealing with, although in California we've been dealing with variable speed pumps for a while now, but this will be good foundational information, how to optimize your pools. But mastering hydraulics requires an understanding of the physics in a couple of different things. So this is a deep dive on sort of the science, and then we'll get into the whys, opportunities, how to apply it, and then see when you use these skills in existing or new pools, how it can massively elevate your game as a pool professional. So this is going to start from the ground up and move through. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Steve Barnes. I am the Director of Science and Compliance for Aquastar Pool Products. We have our own lab, so we like to say we're not guessing, we're testing. So a lot of the videos and the science stuff that you're going to see in here is a result of the research. I've been doing this since 1984. March 1st will be my 41st year doing this. I started out as a research and development technology in the in-floor cleaning system business back when there were only single speed pumps, and a lot of them were the open face bronze. That's how old I am. And so I was involved in testing all of that equipment to figure out what pumps and filters and all that would work with the in-floor pop-up cleaning heads. And so that was, if you have any involvement in those, they're the last thing in the hydraulic system. You have any problems with the rest of the pool, they don't work. And that's why a lot of people hate it. So that's sort of a background on me. So as pool professionals, why do we care about hydraulics? Well, the first thing you have to understand is what Corey taught me, is there's three major things relative to maintaining a healthy pool, and that's circulation, filtration, and chemistry. Hydraulics are very much the core of items 1 and 2. Chemistry obviously is dependent on a good filtration of pump to make it all come together. Today we're going to focus primarily on the hydraulics that drive item 1 and 2. And so if we think about a swimming pool and water quality requirements, is what makes a pool, what separates it from a pond is a pump, number 1. Okay, so if you've been hiking and out in the woods and hopefully up somewhere where you have mountain stream and a pond, and you look at that pond and it's green and stuff floating on it, and you look at the creek and it's clear, okay, going down by the babbling brook. Same rain, same environment. What is the difference? It's constantly moving water, right? Okay, and the pump that's driving that is gravity, and we use that same pump in what we're doing here. So the pump is what creates a pool from being a pond. And then the second element of it is an NSF 50 certified filter. That's our pool filters. And without a pool or without a filter, pools still turn into ponds. Right? Because there's nothing to filter out the debris and silt and all of that. And then the third element is chemistry. So you can have a pump and a filter, and we will see that out in areas where they're filtering literal ponds and homeowners associations and all of that. So the water looks decent. They're not chemically treating it, but they're using a pump to make a fountain that puts oxygen in the water and oxidizes it. So in those remote areas, that's where the sort of the chemistry is, by introducing oxygen into that system, and that keeps it from being nasty, and it reduces algae growth and that kind of thing. So that's the third element of what we are as pool professionals. Now here is an example of a pool turning into a pond. You know, the pump went down and for a while, and so the identical mirror image pools, and the difference is the filter and the pump went down. Okay, so that's sort of obvious, but that's the foundation of what we're doing here. So mastering hydraulics is understanding water and what moves it, and that's going to be the focus that we cover here. So at the high level, here are the things we're going to talk about. Water. There's a very big misunderstanding of what water is. We will be looking at pressure, flow, measuring flow, cavitation, the side effect, that's another way to turn pools green, and then hydraulic tools. So these are the core fundamentals of hydraulics. And this is, so we're going to go through this in progressively more and more detail. So the goal at the end of this is you will have such a thorough understanding of our world and the hydraulics that you will be able to troubleshoot existing pools when you're installing or replacing new equipment, how to optimize that, how to design it for energy savings and profitability and professionalism. And so that's going to be the focus. I really think if you come away from this understanding these fundamentals, a lot of the mysteries we find at the pad are going to start to make more sense. Why do we have cavitation, noise, some things like that? They're all driven by the physics that are in this course. So let's start with what is water. Water is a molecule, H2O, and it's a particle, just like sand. So, and that's the first thing that a lot of people maybe don't fully understand. And the reason that is important is particles collide with one another and solid objects. Okay, so water will take the shape of the container, of the pool, of any. The reason is because it's individual molecules. All right, and it's really important to understand that. And this presentation will explain why. So if we look at water, has no fixed shape because it's like the sand. Okay? So the mechanical properties of it are very similar to sand. So here, this is a vortex as I'm draining a test tank at the Aquastar lab. And you can see this funnel shape. We see it when we drain sinks and bathtubs, and you've probably maybe even seen it in spas or pools, all right? Well, here's the same physics with gravel and sand. And if you notice the shape, so this is just a funnel-shaped device that demonstrates what we're seeing here. So these water molecules are analogous to this, and the reason we get the vortex right over the top of a drain, sink, tub, whatever, is those molecules, just like water, are going right straight down, not the ones on the side. It's not the same. The reason the water twirls is because of the Coriolis effect. Literally, the Earth is moving. I mean, we're moving, I don't know, thousands of miles an hour right now, but so is everything around us. So we're not aware of that. Water, because it's sort of sloshing around, will start to spin because of the Earth's rotation. That's why the vortex always goes the same direction. If you're north of the equator, it goes the opposite direction, south of the equator. Now, some people will say from a hydraulics point of view, you gotta make sure you always set up your eyeballs so they go clockwise with the Coriolis effect. Well, this is so minimal, it's such a minuscule thing, just ignore it. I mean, it just really doesn't matter. And if you've ever had a vortex, you just block your hand through it, right? It's so easy to make go away because it's such a tiny force that causes the water to rotate. The main thing I want you to really understand is the physics of water being a particle. And it's going to become real important once we move to the suction side of the pump. So that's the core of water. So why is this important? Because we can't pull water, it can only be pushed. And that totally impacts how and what's happening on the suction side of hydraulic systems. Without this understanding, you can troubleshoot a lot of stuff and not know that the problem is related to this. So it's really important. The key is water can't be pulled, it can only be pushed. And so here's another little fun example just to break up, otherwise it's a lot of blah, blah, blah. So if you think about particles, I got a new clicker, I don't know how to start it. So, here's the particles of sand, and here's we're digging a hole. Well, we use it in the real world. This is down in San Diego. So this is a pump, literally. I don't think they did this for efficiency. I think it's for look, right? And I'm suggesting not going swimming here. So this is literally one kind of pump, and some of my, where I focus on the physics the whole time, there's a whole bunch. There's the buckets out of wells. There's a whole history in kinds of pumps. But really, for us, all we need to be aware of centrifugal pumps. But even with a centrifugal pump, it is still, the water is being moved, and we're using the impeller to push it. So the water is being pushed. In this case, it's a combination of inside the pump, we have a rotating impeller that scoops up the water. The inlet of it scoops up the sand, the water, and then so that's literally pushing it. That's sort of the first phase at the inlet. And then the centrifugal force is what boosts that pressure and sends it out. That's like your coffee cup on the dashboard. You make a hard right, it goes to the corner. Yes?
So pumps don't suck?
Well, some do. Oh, physics.
No, yeah. Good, but pumps don't suck water in?
Atmosphere pushes.
Come on.
I'm serious. Let's look at this. So, moving on. And yeah, we do pay him to have one. So let's look at now in the section. So that's the water we're dealing with. And now we're going to manage those particles, if you will. So the next major key to keep in mind is what is pressure, or head pressure specifically. And so head pressure is literally the feet of water. So if you look at this tower, it's 155 feet above ground. So you have the weight of the water sitting 155 feet above your garden hose. That head pressure, feet of head, is pushing through the pipes, the cities, the valve, and ultimately that's what's driving the pressure of our cities. So if you go to flatlands, like Texas or the plains where we don't have mountains, you see these scattered all over the place. I was just in Atlantic City last week looking out over, it's a flatland by the ocean. And it's a beautiful view, and I was like, man, there's all these water towers breaking up, and I was like, oh, I should take a picture. Unfortunately, I took it from the hotel room, and it's a picture of me. So, reflection. But all over Atlantic City, every 2-3 blocks are these water towers. And what they do is they pump the water up with a pump. It's always trying to keep up, and it fills it up, and that way we can all take the shower in the morning at the same time. So they get the water up at a high elevation. They're using the weight of that water. Think about carrying buckets full of water. They're heavy, right? So by getting it up at that elevation, we always have a constant flow. Some places, the way it used to be done is they would have pumps that turn on demand, like a well pump. But then the water pressure is up and down and up and down, and that causes water hammer that damages stuff. And we'll look at that phenomenon in the pool industry coming up. So head pressure is literally the high pressure created on the pressure side of the pump. So this is the suction side with the basket. Here's the pressure side. So this is high pressure. Now here is another pressure. This is also pressure, but it is on the suction side. So what we're doing is the low pressure causes is on the suction side of the pump. But let me go back to this and make a couple of things. This goes to the concept that pumps don't suck. So atmospheric pressure is pushing. And so atmospheric pressure is, I have a slide on this, let me. It's coming up later, so I'm going to continue. Okay, so the thing to understand here is the atmospheric pressure. You saw the vortex on the bathtub draining in the sand, in that kind of thing. Well, that vortex, if you will, is under this vacuum head. The same air and water, the physics are the same, so it has low pressure in the vacuum head, and we've all seen these patterns. And that's where the atmospheric pressure is pushing as the pump or the vacuum centrifugal force sends the molecules leaving the area. That creates a low pressure, and then atmospheric pressure is pushing it. And so it's very close to these vacuum heads. That's why we still haven't, and this is so historically misunderstood, is even in public pool codes, it says we need 2 drains 3 feet apart in the deepest part of the pool to cause circulation throughout the pool. It doesn't happen because you can't suck circulation to the steps or the algae in the corner. We have to push it. So suction only is a means to deliver water to the pump.
Is that why, is it Steve? You said Steve? Steve? Is that why it's harder for water to get into a pump when it's high above the water level of the pool?
Good question. The answer is yes, because there's a limit, and I'll cover that coming up. Okay, so another thing to think about this, now that's on the BGB presentations, wrong subject, sorry, I'm moving on. About went into suction safety. So the pumps create the low pressure side of it. Now there's another element, and this is going to be a major topic near the end, is a tool that'll totally separate you from the competition as a way to understand what's happening on residential pools, public pools, without flow meters. Okay, so we're going to cover that in detail. But the differential is we have high pressure and low pressure, and that difference is called differential pressure, and there's a gauge to measure that. There's also, we use that differential, and it becomes the TDH, or total dynamic head of the pump. So you combine the pump curve, and you're going to see a lot on this. The pump curve has total dynamic head, which is both suction and pressure added together, and then across the bottom is gallons per minute. So as the pressure, whether it be your filter gets dirty, that creates higher TDH and lowers the flow rate. If your skimmer baskets are plugged or you have small pipe, that creates high TDH that lowers the flow. So understanding this is really important. So we have, if we think about the basic pressure rules, we have high pressure and low pressure. And then the difference between them is very, very important to understand. So here's a visual of this. So here is the low pressure on the pump, and this is a vacuum gauge, and that we measure that in inches of mercury. On the pressure side of the pump is a pressure gauge, and we measure that with a pressure gauge. Then between them is a differential pressure gauge that is measuring both simultaneously, and it gives you the difference between them. And I'm just introducing this concept to you now. It'll make a lot more sense when we get near in the back end and learn how to apply this to your pools. And we'll have a case study where it's applied. We can take a decent 1 horsepower pool, efficient, that was looking great, leverage variable speed, leverage the hydraulics of that, and this pool went from $95 a month to $5, maintaining the exact same flow rate. That's the part why these details will help you, because to understand that then will give you the confidence to sell upgraded equipment, to take the time to find out what's going on and really separate yourselves as pool professionals. So A is the pressure side, B is the vacuum or inches of mercury or low pressure, and then differential. And we're measuring the difference across the pump, and we use the drain plugs to do this. So now here, let's get into the physics of what pressure is. So if we specifically pounds per square inch, so that's what PSI stands for, PSI gauge. So it's pounds per square inch. Well, what is that? 1 PSI is 1 square inch. So pounds per square inch. So if you picture 1 inch square, and then if we extend that column of water up 2.31 feet and measure that amount of water, it weighs 1 pound. So if you visualize pounds per square inch, 2.31 feet. You've been in hydraulics classes and heard how to calculate TDH. This is literally where it's coming from. So that on that scale, if you could magically balance that column of water, it would weigh 1 pound. Now, if you take that and multiply it out over 144 square inches of a 12 by 12 drain, or the 500, 600, 700 pounds or surface area inside a filter. So now if the surface area of a filter inside of it is 500 square inches and it has 1 PSI, how much force is on that filter? 500 pounds. And that's why filters sometimes have bad days. They've got to be able to strong. And that's at 1 PSI. So now you take a filter up to 40, 50 PSI. Do that math, I can't off the top of my head. You can see that's where this really matters. So that's what PSI is. So 1 PSI equals 2.31 feet of water. Remember the water tower? So that's where we had 155 feet. You take 155, divide it by 2.31, that's where the 67 PSI in your hand came from. Is that coming together? Are you able to follow this?
Yes, absolutely.
Just check. All right, so now let's go to the other side of the pump. Did you want me to go back? Sure. We have plenty of time. So. All right, so that's the pressure side of the pump. Now this is the suction side or low pressure side of the pump. So that is inches of mercury is what that stands for, and how they get that out of that, I have no idea. Some scientist or guy did that, wasn't it? So inches of mercury is 1 inch of mercury equals 1.13 feet of water. Okay, so that would be the equivalent of what the pump is sucking. So instead of the pressure being higher, it's lower. Now I'll use this, and this is an inches of mercury gauge that I dropped and broke, so it's reading 0 at the moment, but this would be as the suction goes up on your pump, it's going to suck on the water, and then the units are inches of mercury. When I was in school, we actually had these things. Now it's poison, we're not allowed to touch it. We play with it in our hands. That explains me and him. All right, his might have been lead in the water.
I only used to eat my mercury, so.
Yours might have been lead in the water. Okay, so this is the units, and this is important to understand because we're going to use a gauge to measure what's going on the suction side, and we need to get to feet of water on the pump curve. So the calculation here is 1 inches of mercury equal 1.13 feet. So very different units on either side of the pump, and that's what makes this complicated. Now the other thing, I think I must have deleted it, but another thing to understand about pressure is even though we call it a vacuum gauge or inches of mercury, It's all positive pressure. So zero PSI is outer space. And what zero pressure is, no water molecules. So space is a vacuum. Vacuum in that term means an absence of matter, right? So there's nothing there, and then as we come down into the atmosphere, we start to have more and more, and you see the ships come in and they get hot and all of that kind of stuff, right? Well, they're colliding with the oxygen molecules and the other molecules, and so they're crashing into sand, if you will, conceptually. So that is, way up in the atmosphere, that's zero. Right now, where we're standing, we're at 14.7 psi. So that pressure that's on us at sea level is the weight of all the air and moisture and all of that above us, is literally sitting on top of us. It's sitting on top of the pool water. And so that's what pushes the water to the pump when the pump moves the water out of the way. It's the same if you've ever seen sci-fi or whatever. They're in spacesuits and space capsules and the cartoons where they take the spacesuit and their eyes bug out and all of that. That's because we grew up and we are hardwired to withstand 14.7 psi. It's pushing against us. Our body has it equal. So when we artificially go into space and then take away, then our molecules want to go their separate ways. So the point here is when we're talking about, there's another, I don't have any graphics of it, but when you talk about pressure, there's a PSI gauge, pounds per square inch absolute. And what those gauges are, they are sealed. So inside of the case, that's why they're expensive, there's literally a vacuum. Okay, so now when you take that out of the box here, it's going to be reading at 14.7. And if you put it on the pump or a vacuum pump like this, and you start removing the air or water, then that vacuum is going to come all the way down. And in science, where they can, a small device, they can go to absolute zero. They can pump all the air out of it, and that's zero. So you can use a pressure gauge coming back to measuring the suction. You can do that. We use them in the lab, but it's a pain in the neck, and we've been doing it for a long time. And they're expensive, so we use two different gauges. So just understand that when we say a vacuum gauge, that's because this is 30 inches of mercury is approximately a full vacuum. Okay? So now let's look at the differential gauge. This one's pretty easy to understand. Oh, hang on, I missed one thing. On this gauge and the PSI gauge, when you say PSI gauge, the difference is, and I think I'll have this in another slide when I think about it, it's measuring the difference between, this is inches of mercury, so this is measuring the suction side of the pump compared to atmospheric pressure, which is 14.7. PSI gauge is measuring the difference between the pipe connection and atmosphere, but it's positive. So PSI gauge can't go below zero. It can't go below 14.7. So when that happens, then we switch to a vacuum gauge, this one, and it can't go above 14.7. It's two different technologies. You can get combination gauges where it goes both directions. Okay, so that's still a gauge. So there's a lot of tools available here. But understanding the differences, this is measuring between this and the pump suction. So now when we look at a differential gauge, it's going to measure the difference between the high and the low. And so instead of being connected to atmosphere, the low pressure side of it connects to the pump suction, the high pressure connects to the return side, and it's measuring the difference. So it's measuring the difference between those two and gives you a single answer, and that will make sense to you in which we get into the TDH and how that applies to pump curves and plumbing. So this, as a pool pro that's going to take this to the next level, this is your friend.
Where would I get those?
Well, this one, we don't sell it as Aquastar. So this and, oh, it's in the truck, I forgot to bring them in. This easiest one is a company called Master Car. MCMASTER -car, CARR. They are a massive supply house. If you order this, and this one is right about $300, they have one that's a little bit less money. But basically, anything you order from this national company, if I order it today, it'll be there tomorrow. They are expensive because of convenience, but it's industrial stuff. So from a business point of view, these gauges, any that you get from them, are going to be way higher quality than the least expensive stuff for pool distribution that's a plastic housing. So these are sort of pro-level tools, if you will. There's also connections and stuff they have. I can show you more of that and answer those questions, but it's a great tool. That's a good place to get it. Amazon has some stuff, but it's generally crap. I quit buying them. And we don't sell any of this. These are tools. Okay, so to try and sort of tie this together visually, we have low pressure tap. This tube's connecting here. So this goes to this side, the high pressure, and then it reads the difference. This will make more sense as we proceed. So here we have the pump pressure. That's the high pressure, the pump suction, which is the low, and then we measure the differential, and this gauge is called PSID. I talked about PSIA, absolute. This one's PSID, differential. Those units can be all kinds of things. It can be feet of water, directly. It's just different units of pressure. Okay, so we talked about this. So it's really important to understand that we deal with two pumps. Atmospheric pressure, we can't make it any bigger or any smaller. The scientists that taught me this stuff, they talk about atmospheric, and gravity is the pump we can't turn off, right? You get a leak, you can't turn off atmosphere, right? And it's a law of physics, or the affinity law that we're going to talk about. So the way this works, what's going on with the centrifugal pump is when you turn it on, centrifugal force scoops up the sand and shoves it out the pipe. Now we don't have as many molecules, so we're getting closer, and if the pump's valve is closed, it will take a lot of it, and we can go very close to outer space. 25 inches of mercury, outer space being 33, I think it is. Okay, so the first thing that happens when we turn on a pump, it starts to move the water out of the way. That creates low pressure. There's literally less water, less molecules on the suction side of the impeller. And what happens is atmospheric pressure pushes on the surface of the water, pushes the water through our suction pipe into the front of the pump. That's why the elevation, wake up. That's why I'm answering your question and you're not paying attention.
Well, I was checking your math.
So this is what moves the water to the pump. It's not sucking, atmospheric pressure is pushing it. And, so you distracted me. Is the elevation of the pump. So if 1 PSI is 2.31 feet, and we only get 14.7 PSI here at sea level, a lot less in Denver, okay, then we can only go to, you get to the point if you put a pump, now they're all rated not to go above 10 or 12, just so they can function, but if you take a pump and put it at 33 feet, it will never move any water because atmospheric pressure can't push it that high.
That's 33 feet above the water level?
Yes, that would be, if you had a pump that's capable of going to a full vacuum, one of those science kinds that they use in laboratories, and you put it 33 feet above and had a clear straw that you could watch, it'll come up to 30 feet And then after that, it'll never get any water to that pump.
Is that why pumps have a lift maximum on your AquaStar pump?
Yes, absolutely. And they vary by the kind of impeller. So like open face, bronze, water, or even the waterfall pumps that are low speed, low pressure, they can't lift the water more than, some they can't lift at all. We have self-priming and then non-self-priming pumps. And the non-self-priming pumps can't move enough of the water out of the way to create the suction to lift any amount, even 10, 12 inches above the pool, much less 10, 12 feet. We've been dealing with this as a society and on the codes and standards as FEMA because of all of these the hurricanes and floods we have. Well, they have to, if you've got FEMA flood insurance, they have to replace our pool equipment. And so they said, we want all pool equipment above 11 feet above floodplain. And some people where it passed this was over in Georgia and Florida and all of that, and they said, oh, okay, I want to rebuild my house from the hurricane. They rebuilt the house, they rebuilt the pool, and they put all the equipment up on the second floor. It didn't work because they could not get the water up to it. So the compromise was to put the pump down on the ground and then put everything else up.
It doesn't matter like pipe diameter, right? It only matters like distance that the actual water is traveling.
It's both. Good question. So it does matter, but it's different in the size of the pipe is how fast can 14 psi push water through it. So if you think about a giant milkshake straw, right, versus a bar straw, a little swizzle, they don't give you the little itty bitty cheap straws for the milkshake because it's so hard, it's so thick, right? And so the same kind of thing is just as bigger pipe means we can push more water with the pump at a higher flow rate, but at some point you just can't get any more water through the small pipe. That's why the old 1.5-inch pipe, those will be noisy pumps, cavitate. You can put a bigger pump on it because you want the spa jets to work, and it just doesn't work. It's because we can't get enough water to the pump. And in the case studies, you'll see how that sort of works out coming up.
So a bigger pump on smaller plumbing is just not gonna work? I keep adding bigger pumps in the small pipe?
It's diminishing returns for sure. And at some point, a bigger pump is going to cavitate and destroy itself. That's why you had a spa jet that had, a 1.5-horse pump on it. They weren't happy, so you go to a 3-horse and now it burns up every other month. That's often a problem. So moving on, the key takeaway here is pumps push. They do not suck. Okay, and this is pretty cool about how powerful pump is. And on the pressure side of the pump, you can basically, there's no limit. If you think about a high pressure washer, 5 horsepower, little itty bitty pipe, massive pressure, so it's low flow but super high flow. When you talk about a well pump in Arizona, where I'm from, our water is down like 1,200 feet. Okay, so what they will do there is they do stacks of impellers. So a bottom impeller will push it to the next one, to the next one. Each one will go up, say, 100 psi. And if it's 1,200 feet down, to get it up to ground level, you'll have 10, 12, 11, and it's just impeller after impeller. And they have to put that pipe at the bottom of the well. So that's why they're long and skinny and they drop them down, because you can put all those impellers up on the ground and they'll just sit there and run and burn up. Make sense? All right. So now let's look at flow. This one's a lot simpler, but it's very important to understand, because when we were talking about pressure, and we'll go more into it in pipe size and stuff like that, is so the pressure at the filter, right, at the pad is higher than what you get at your spa jets. and that's because of the loss of pressure as you go out to the pool. Or you have, high pressure at the skimmer, 14.7 psi, but now we're going 100 feet through that 1.5-inch pipe, and now it's cavitating. All of that is pressure related. Pressure changes depending on where you are in the hydraulic system. Flow does not. Flow is constant throughout the whole system. So I want you to think about this train car analogy as each one of these being 1 gallon. All right? And then let's put a flow meter and a railroad crossing. Okay, so now if you think of this as each one of those as 1 gallon, if you record this for a minute, and I counted this, there's 120 train cars that go by. So that would be 120 gallons per minute, right? That's at one point, at the pump, at the filter, at the flow meter. As soon as you branch, right, the train can't separate, but you can go pool spa or whatever. But relative to the pump, the flow at the pump and after the filter are always going to be identical. But the pressure at the top of the pump versus after the filter could be 10 psi or whatever the difference is. So the pressure changes, the gallons per minute does not. So in this example, the engines are moving at the exact same speed as the caboose. And so if you think about water moving through our system as that freight train, we have to manage it. If we stop it immediately, we can cause cavitation, water hammer. So just understanding this sort of basic level is that water is all moving at the same speed, but the pressure is what's changing. So another element, and this goes to your pipe size question, is if you look here, what this is now we talk about in pipe size, we size pipes based on feet per second. So a public pool, pipe size, you take the design flow rate, if it needs 100 gallons a minute, you size the pipe so that that freight train does not exceed 6 feet per second. Okay, now remember that we have the same flow rate. So if we look at 60 gallons a minute in 2-inch pipe versus 60 gallons a minute in 1.5 inch, this is the fluidics simulation. Here you can see, and there's units there that even I can't see, but this is 6 feet per second. Here, it's not moving. And this is much faster. It's the same flow rate, right? But now to do the 60 gallons a minute, the water has to be moving a lot faster. So let me go to an automobile analogy. As if you're on, doing 40 miles an hour where you're just cruising along, okay, then that's, that you're gonna use, whatever, you're getting 20 miles to the gallon. Now you take it, double it, and go to 80. What's your gas mileage gonna do? Why is that? Because it takes so much more energy to overcome the wind. In that case, that's the reason. There's some on tires and stuff too. But think about the wind at high speed being this smaller pipe. So to do the same speed, you use a lot more energy. And on the pressure side, we can just go to a bigger pump. But if it's on the suction side and it can't keep up, we only get one pump gravity. That's why what we do on the suction side of systems is so important at the design phase. And if it's an old pool, you can do a lot of things. Get rid of the Ortega valves and stuff like that. Ultimately, there's not a lot you can do. New pools where they really have blown it, the pool builders first, often the last pool they build, they use 1.5-inch pipe and a 3 horsepower pump, and it's bad all the way. And the only thing that can be done in that case is put in a bigger pipe. Now, if you have older pools with smaller pipe, drains and that kind of a thing, the key is to just make it as open up everything as best you can. You can't replace the pipe to make it easier to get to the pump. Yes?
With the variable speed, did we lower the speed?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And what you would do, let's say here at this high speed, we start to cavitate the pump or it just gets noisy. What we have to do is sort of lower it so that it's no longer outrunning the atmospheric pressure. Very good question.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
So if I'm building the pool, let's say like 60 feet away from the equipment, and then I want my jets to have good return, should I start with the 2.5 and then 2, or 2.5 and like 2.5 and then reduce it to 1 to 2 and connect it to the returns, or what's the best way to like have a good return?
Yeah, so generally speaking, the way is, I'll use like Water Shapes and Genesis, the big high-end builders. What they do is they are sizing their pipe for not to exceed 5 feet per second.
Okay.
Building code for public pool is 6. And the reason they do that is they want the water to be, because the freight train's moving the same speed, or the same gallons per minute, they want to run that water at 40 miles per hour, not 80, right? So they're gonna use bigger pipe to slow it down. Now, on the pressure side of the pump, we can put bigger pumps, right? On the suction side, you can't. So it's most important to size for that. Now, once you get so far out, and this is where it gets into the math I did not put in this, is once you could maybe go 40 feet, and then after that, the head loss is so much that you would go to the next pipe size, because there's resistance, just like the wind, as that water, those molecules are rubbing against the inside of the pipe. You know, they're gonna lose pressure as we get closer to the pump. We only have atmospheric pressure, so what you have to do is reduce the restriction. And this isn't the elevation issue, this is just reduce the friction, the water rubbing on the edges, so that it'll get there. Another thing, and I almost put this slide in, is when you're doing your pumps, if you have a slight hill, okay, you're gonna put, maybe it's only 3 feet, okay? The pumps are self-priming, they'll go to 8, 10, 11, right? But what you, and so we go to run the pool, let's say from here to that wall is just a 3-foot rise above water level. And what we do is we get our trencher out there, right? We want our pipe 12 inches down. So we're gonna go all the way out there. Now what's happened is about 1/3 of the way to that pump, our pipe has now crossed above the water level of the pool. And so the priming now isn't 2 feet. It's still 2 feet, but it's all of that air in that pipe. So the way to do this, I can do it here. So here's our pool, here's our pump, and here's our ground. So we can, the classic way of doing this is we're gonna come down, here's our pipe, here's our 12-inch trench to the pool, right? And our water level is here. We're gonna have to suck the air out of all of that. So what we wanna do in new construction, it's a pain in the ass, but it's the right thing to do, is that trench needs to come down below water level, I went way too far, and then up. So now we're only taking the air out of here instead of here, and it can be cubic feet. The difference between these two, this will prime in under a minute. The other maybe take 10, 20 if you can even get there. So what we do to solve that problem is we put a check valve in front of the pump. What's a check valve do? Restricts flow. And now we're back to noise and energy efficiency.
That makes sense.
This is why I go to this painful, but this level of detail for you on this, so when you really understand what's going on, then you say, you know what? I know you don't want to drink this trench 20 feet, 2 foot deep, but that's what we're doing today, right? And it also can help on the size of the pipe, but here a big suction pipe that helps us on the suction makes that much more air we got to get rid of. So the big pipe that's helping us for our jet further away makes it 10 minutes, 20 minutes to prime that. So see how all this works together? Okay, so we're going to get into more
Questions?
Instead of the check valve, like let's say the feature pump is not pulling from the local places you don't have the freeway on it, could you just put a 2-way deadhead for when you're opening the vacuum on?
Oh, absolutely.
Way better than a check valve?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have water, if you have valves, equipment that's above or below, either way, and I encourage the ball valves versus, even though we sell the 3-way and 2-way, the reason being is when they're in the full open, it's basically the equivalent of the straight pipe.
Wow.
Now, they're a pain in the ass otherwise, but because that's just for
Tipo que-
servicing, right?
Yeah.
Other
No
than-
les gusta a la gente tener los contratos. Casi el chip se va.
Okay, moving along.
Es que dice que cuando tengas aquí por el lugar de ir así.
Oh, so
Sí, vayas
this
así.
is, so 60 gallons a
Pues el
minute.
aire está en medio.
I forgot this was here. So on the 2-inch pipe, it's 5.9 feet per second. And then on the 1.5-inch, it's almost 10. So you can see it's moving way faster. So that's the,
Yeah.
If I may elaborate, you asked about turning down the variable speed pump. One of the questions we get all the time is, hey, I'm building this pool, how big of a pump do I need? Right, like your suggestion. Our first question is, what size plumbing are you using? Who here has installed a big 3-horsepower pump that we all buy? Put it on 2-inch plumbing, start it up at 3450, and that thing shakes.
Yeah.
And you run the RPM down from 3450 to about 2600, and it's quiet, and it's purring like a kitten, right? Right?
Yeah.
Pumps don't make noise, hydraulics make noise. What did you just tell yourself? Pushing too much water. You have too big of a pump,
or too small a pipe.
or too small a pipe. But as servicers, I'm a pool guy. That builder put in a 3-horsepower pump on 2-inch plumbing, and if you take it above that 2700, you're not moving any more water through that little bar straw. You need a bigger straw, bigger McDonald's straw. I like a lot of food, I don't like to work a lot to stuff through the straw, right? I'm a big boy. I can take a skinny kid in here like Corey.
All right, I'm cutting this off.
The point is all that is, which goes back to you and what you said back here, doesn't matter how big Corey and I are trying to get all that Slurpee through the straw, we need a bigger straw.
Got it.
So adjust, so your question is so subjective to everything in that we're talking about. As service people, and we can only do with what we're given, size your pump to your plumbing and your plumbing to your pump.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through this section pretty quick on what drives flow, so that we can get into these case studies, so that I think this will come together on how you can improve your business with this information. So we know, we should know by now what moves water to the pump.
Yes.
Atmospheric pressure, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So particles must be pushed, they cannot be pulled. That's so important. This was the picture I was trying to find. So here is the atmospheric pressure. There you can literally see the air. That happens to be the Endeavour space shuttle.
NASA.
Last one coming out. I was a science guy, I love it. So this is the atmospheric pressure that's pushing down on the Earth. Okay? And it's substantial enough we can fly airplanes in. Hold them up. So I mean, and we can feel it in the fans and all of that. So I can't see it, but we can definitely feel it. So that's where we get the 14.7 at sea level. Okay, so this is a recap. The pump turns on, it creates high pressure, pushes it to low pressure, or pushes it to the pool, which would be lower pressure. Now that creates low pressure in the pump basket. Atmospheric pressure pushes it with maximum 14.7 here at the beach to the pump. So that's how that is working as a recap to all of that. So now this section is why. Why are we going into this level and at risk of, I don't know, my sanity? I'm going to let him comment here a little bit more. So
You're saying a little bit.
So one of the things is focus, and this is our customer, this is the sort of environment we're trying to create, right? And so to do that, I'm going to focus now on a single speed pump has died and it's time to replace it. So we get a customer who calls, my pool pump's not working, came home from vacation, my pool's draining, please help. Okay, now she could call her home warranty service, right? A lot of them will cover these things and they'll send out the Acme misspelled service and repair. He's almost professional. And he does appliances, pool pumps, they do everything. So Now, in one sense, they look very professional. Uniforms, they come in, they're licensed, they're certified, okay? But they don't know what they're doing relative to what we're here for today. You know, they're going to do a like-for-like pump replacement. That's what the warranty is, and it may not be the right thing. We have do-it-yourselfers. It's not that difficult to disconnect a pump and put in a replacement, especially for like-for-like. So really the value of you being here today is to be the pool professional, and that's using this other stuff we're talking about. So, chime in here.
About what? Oh.
The opportunities, because you were a service guy, and just the value of this, just a minute or so.
So, when you're so you're talking about,
The value of separating yourself from just the other pool company that's just doing like for like.
so what I always like, we're service people, right? You're going to a front door, you're getting a call, whether it's your customer or somebody you're getting that's not on your route. And you knock on the door, you ring the doorbell, they got a ring app. Would you answer your door if you were at your ring app trying to sell yourself your pump? Or would you not open that door because of the appearance of how you're dressed? Looking like you just glued up an entire pool and you got chlorine all over you. Would you allow your family to open up the door? Or would you look like you're supposed to be, oh, there's the service guy here, he's in a uniform, he's looking good. I say that to my kids. Would you, if you were interviewing yourself for a job, would you hire you if you were interviewing you? My son goes, nope. And I go, that's because you're not getting a job. So think of that as a pool professional. It's a very loose word to use. And you're going up to win that job other than the acne guy that's doing his job. You need to look like the part that you play and do what you do. I used to keep 3 shirts in my truck when I'm blowing in chlorine, when I would put on a collared shirt when I knock on the door, and then when I start doing the job, and then I throw on the other shirt.
Nice.
It's very big because you're representing your company. You're trying to win that job. When you open up your truck, does all your shit fall on the ground? All your jewelry,
Get personal.
your 9/16 socket, right? Or do you have your bag nice and clean?
Okay, with that, I'm cutting you off.
Right?
No, but what, thank you, that perspective I think is important, because I've been the lab guy, okay? So another element of this, again, this is a variation on this theme, is they look very professional, but they don't have the skills. So over and above investing in your uniform, your trucks, your appearance, your attitude, there's also tools, and this is where I'm going with this. Is when you look at these kinds of home warranty, they're organized, not only the look that you were just talking about, but they have the correct tools for their trade. The different things for HVAC, electrical, all of that, right? So they have the specialty tools that make their profession professional. And so we're going to get into some of those tools. We've been using them here and why they will benefit you in understanding. So going into this is, the hypothetical here is we did a like-for-like replacement, but you can't because it was a 1 horsepower single speed and now they're illegal. So they do the equivalent variable speed pump.
Equivalent.
Yeah, okay. So it's a like for like because you don't have to adjust the piping. You undo the unions and it fits perfect. And you turn it on and it's a lot louder because it's a more powerful pump. But that's not my problem. I'm the swap and run guy. All right? So, but now what's going to happen, and this we've been through.
We all like that swap and run. You really use splash and dash, right?
Well,
New term.
I think that's trademarked.
No, that's good. Swap and run.
So one of the things that is a reality when this happens is the first thing that happens is 1 month out, they're freaking out because their electric bill went up. Because they put a bigger pump on it and now they're moving additional electricity without actually making a difference to the pool. The next thing that happens is 2 months later, we start losing the pool. And the reason for that is it wasn't a properly sized pump for the filter or properly programmed. So it blows through grids. It blows through lids. So all of these bad things that can happen. why we need to be the pro, that's where these tools all come together. So again, we know this is the process. So now we're going to look at the units that involve the pump curves and what's published for all manufacturers. So we've seen this. This is the differential, is called total dynamic head. Okay, that's that differential gauge I've been showing you. And those units are in feet of water. Our pressure gauges are in PSI, or inches of mercury, or PSID. So to get to the pump curve, we have to understand it. So I'll go through these pretty quick. I think most of us probably understand that is, we've got TDH, total dynamic head, we have PSI on the pressure side, inches of mercury, and we have to, all of these show up on a pump curve. So if you look at the pump, we have feet of water is the pressure units. How much pressure is the pump facing? Then, that's that on all pump curves. That's required by the NSF standard. So pump head pressure units equal feet of water. Then we have the PSI is going to also the units we're going to measure on our gauges are in PSI. So we convert them to feet of water so that we can look it up on the head on that. Pressure is coming off the pressure side, and then inches of mercury comes off the suction. So gauges, I covered this, so I'm going to move to PSI gauges are the difference between atmospheric pressure and the water. I covered this earlier. So it's atmosphere outside the gauge, and it's measuring what's going on in the filter housing. And then inches of mercury, I covered this previously. It's the other half of the units that are in the pump curve, and that's on the suction side, because both sides impact the performance of the pump. And so we have to combine them, and this is the process to do that. So you can measure inches of mercury, and that's pressure below atmospheric pressure, 14.7, and it's and so that's on the suction side of the pump. So the units, I think everybody with me on this. Okay, we'll move along. So now we're going to use these pressure gauges to measure flow, because that's what we need to know if we have a heater that needs 40 to 50 gallons per minute. If you have a salt cell that needs 40, well, they'll tell us that, but we can't measure that on most residential pools. All right, so this is the way to do that so that you can optimize your systems to be running at the right flow rate so we're not blowing up the E-grid by overpowering, okay? So that's sort of where this is going. And so if we look at gallons per minute, we can do it by measuring with a flow meter, or you can measure TDH. So to measure TDH, we're going to have PSI on the discharge. It's easiest to use the plugs like we've been showing. And then inches of mercury. Those are both pressures that we have to understand. So we're going to convert each of those to feet of water. All right, so I'm going to step you through how to get to those units. And the reason we need feet of water, that's what's published on the pump curve. So to use the pump curve, this is the way this works, is TDH is the pressure, gallons per minute on the bottom. And if we look at two conditions, so let's start with the dirty filter before we've cleaned it. High pressure, low flow. So as that filter's getting dirty, and we clean it twice a year, whether it needs it or not, it's loading up, and the higher that pressure is, the lower the flow rate on your pool, but not the lower your electric bill. Mm-hmm. So they're paying to not filter water if we don't clean the filters often enough. Let's look at this with real data. So if we go to the clean filter, and we lower it by the 10 PSI that we recommend, so we're not going to clean it till it gets to 10 PSI. Look at the flow rate. We went from 60-ish, I forget what it was, I didn't look, to over 120. 10 PSI craters our flow performance. It's just devastating, but we can't see it. And if our pump, when the filter is clean, is really noisy, because it's trying to cavitate or growl, then as the filter gets dirty, ooh, the pool's nice and quiet. Because we're not filtering as much. See how it's all tying together? Okay? So that's the concept that we're going to look at. So here's a way to do this with a pressure gauge and a vacuum gauge. So we measure the low pressure on the suction side is here on this, and we're going to measure the high pressure on the pressure side below the discharge in the impeller. And then what we have to do is we convert vacuum to feet, and then we convert pressure to feet, and then we add them together to get TDH. And the units you've seen before is inches of mercury to go to 1 foot of water is 1.13. And 1 PSI equals 2.31. So you gotta measure and calculate these separately. Okay, so we measure, I'll take you through an example. Let's say we measure 10 inches of mercury, which is on the high side, that pump's noisy. Then that's gonna be 11 feet of head. We measure the pressure side at 20, we do the math, 20 times 2.31 is 46. So now we're in feet, and all we have to do is add these together. So the combination is 57. 57 TDH based on this method. Now what we do is we go to that pump's manufacturer's pump curve. You need to measure all of this on high speed. And if you're going to find the maximum system flow for VGB drain cover safety, you need to make sure the pool's clean and it's just on the drain and all of that kind of thing. That's where this tool can come in. But we measured 57, so we go to this pump curve, we look up 57 on the left side, and then you just follow over, go down, so this one's running at 118 gallons a minute. We just did some research on this because I teach the Model Aquatic Health Code and building officials. We want them to allow these tools to confirm VGB compliance instead of using the max flow of the pump. So we went in and did a deep dive on the accuracy of this, and that's what these photos were that you saw. And this pump curve on that pump with our, we know it's very accurate, it's ours, but we measured 120 and the actual flow rate was 119.9. Okay. Once I showed this to the building officials and the health department, they went, okay, I don't trust flow meters anymore, I want to use TDH on everything. And I went, oh, that's not what I meant. That just happened a week ago. Okay, so that's the flow side of this. So now let's look at cavitation when we restrict the small pipe and things. So cavitation is basically is water vapor. So we separated the molecules so much it's vapor. We can do it with heat. Those are water vapor molecules, okay? We can see it because of temperature and boiling water. What's happening in the pump is it creates such low pressure that we lower the boiling pressure of water down to 80 degrees or whatever the water temperature is. Physics are the same, but why it's happening is different. So, water, this was more of a recap of water can be solid, gas, or liquid, and all of that, but that's not so much important. We're going to look at the state in physics where it's vaporized. And it's, so the vaporization pressure. So this is cavitation. I can't find or get video of cavitation on a pool pump, right? But I can see what's happening with these ship impellers, and this is big science, because if you spin a propeller so fast that it cavitates, it vaporizes the water, puts air bubbles in, and when they collapse, there's so much force, it's over 21 to 28,000 PSI when that bubble collapses, and that's what chews up boat props and impellers and other parts. You can also create cavitation if you have a hard 90 and it's too fast. That cavitation will chew through an elbow, especially copper. Okay, so this is the physics of what cavitation is. Here it is in the real world. In our lab, we were doing drain cover testing, and we let air get into this pipe, and it turned it into just this puff ball, and that's not good for safety.
You said water too fast will go through copper turns and destroy it, right?
Yeah.
Where do we have copper in? Heaters.
Oh.
Like from the
Heaters-
desert, we don't have heaters.
Heaters, copper will destroy that. Water flow will destroy a heater exchanger in no time at all.
Okay, so this also, this goes to, this was suction. Now keep in mind, this is about 20 inches of 1.5-inch pipe in our lab, and then it goes to 10-inch, and it's connected to a 10 horsepower pump with 10-inch pipe from here to that wall. So the pump has got enough water in that pipe to keep pulling, even though this is, should be captured.
It was. Yeah, there it is.
Sorry. So what we're doing is we're coming up, and I can tell you, when you just start to see the water vaporizing here, that was at about 155 gallons a minute, or 1.5-inch pipe. So you can't replicate this, and the pump just stalls, it won't prime and all of that. But so it starts at 157, and it goes to it absolutely is vaporizing all of the water by the time we got to about 188 gallons a minute. And then ultimately the pump gets starved. But it was, we saw this through a drain cover. It was so cool. I was like, wow, let's shoot some video. Here is the pump stall. I didn't turn it off. It's just, it's cavitating and stopped. So that's what cavitation looks like at the impeller. Somewhat similar to that boat problem, right? So that's what the problem is. It's just the atmospheric pressure can't keep up with that 10 horsepower. And here are the physics in the air. Okay, so what happens, those jets are making a hard turn. It creates such low pressure above the wing that it vaporizes the water in the air. And that's what's causing that. So the same physics, obviously very different environment. Now here is water hammer. Again, more research relative to the VGBA. So here we have the water going through the pump. This is about 6 feet to, or 10 feet to a pump, then 25 feet back to the pool. This is 2-inch pipe and it's clear. And so what's happening is we're stopping that freight train by snagging the caboose. And what happens is all the connections to the trains break and they're all scattered down the track with gaps in between. That's vaporizing the water in the pool. That's literally what's happening. And one of the things to understand is we see it here, right? And it's happening here. We were able to observe it all the way back to the pump. So when that's happening, that vaporization, because what's happening is that freight train's continuing to roll through the pressure side of the system, and it's continuing to go, and what happens is this being blocked at the tail end just separates the water molecules. So this is what's happening. This is, and I told you about the 21,000 PSI on the cavitation. That's why slamming a valve shut on a pool system can break stuff, just because of the massive forces. Now that real high cavitation drills into metal and plastic. This is a little bit different, but here what happens is you might have 150 pounds of water in pipe going around elbows and you stop it with a valve. You have 150 pounds slamming into that valve, slamming into elbows, and that's why water hammer breaks stuff, because we're stopping the freight train instantly.
Who here takes their 3-way valve and turns it really fast and the system shakes? That's what you're doing. That's why actuators turn slow. Don't do that, especially on the pressure side.
Just because I'm safety and
Don't
compliance.
turn it fast, turn it slow.
This is a disclaimer. Don't do this at home. So let me get to the, okay, so here's kind of to summarize the cavitation. It's easy to do in our world. Hog skimmer baskets, right? And we cause a restriction and we start to, the pump gets noisy and it tears up bearings and all of that stuff is because atmospheric pressure can't keep up with the impeller. So that's the sort of the problem there. So poorly cleaned pump baskets, will crater your performance if they're not. It's just really important to manage the debris on the suction side. PS pump, we talked about running it faster than atmospheric pressure can create, because the pool was designed for a 1 horsepower pump. We put a 3 horsepower variable speed because we had to, and now we have all of these new problems we didn't have before. Hence the green pool, and problems a month, 2, 3 later. The new pump goes through bearings. These are all caused because of suction side problems. Too much pressure on a 3 horsepower pump on the spa jets, it's not a problem because it's not cavitating. Yes?
On the suction side, if you go from like 1.5 inches to 2 inch, I feel like there's a little bit of cavitation, of course, like in the beginning. But do you think it's always cavitating in there, going from the 1.5 inches, and this is on the suction side, so, and you're stepping up in pipe size? You think it's always cavitating in there, or just like the initial sucking the air out of the 2-inch pipe?
Yeah, cavitate, you can't, that's priming, so that's different because it was, you already have air in the system. So all of this, think of it in terms of it's successfully primed, right? There's no air in the system. You have a variable speed pump and you are speeding it up to the point where the pool pressure can't keep up. Or another thing that you might have is it's all fine when it's in pool mode, but it switches to spa mode, or you do it manually, right? So you continue to only have 1 suction, but you have 2 returns. Or you know, they do water feature and the spa jets and the filtration all at once, and all of a sudden it just doesn't work. Even though all the pipe sizing's right, the valves, the programming's right, atmosphere can't keep up with that level. So it's just, that's why I focus so much on the suction side, because there isn't anything we can do about it. Short of running more pipe to the pool. So, and anything you can do anywhere, let's say, because then you'll see a case study where we cut off the pad at the equipment pad. We didn't repipe it. And there we went to more efficient sweep elbows and stuff. In fact, I got hurt to get there. But you'll see there's lots we can do at the pad, even though it's not great at the pool. And let me get to that as quick as I can. So I think we covered all of this. This is a recap of this stuff, so I'm going to move on. Again, atmospheric pressure source. So let's look at the hydraulics tools. You've seen this before. This is the step through to use a vacuum gauge to ultimately get to TDH. Okay, if you want to take a picture of that, that's a pretty decent summary of that process. Because it gives you sort of everything in one snapshot. Okay, so now, let me go back. 5. All right, here we go. So now the differential pressure gauge is way easier. So you just connect it on both sides. It reads out in PSI, so you just multiply by 2.31 and you're done. So it gives you TDH in one simple step. And it's very, very accurate. You've only got one gauge, one thing to drop. Protect them all. But okay, so I want to jump ahead to, these are just tools to do this. I think I've covered it well enough. I want to get to let me jump to this case study. So I'm going to walk you through, this is applied, we've got just a few more minutes. So this is a case study. What we have is this is a 19,400 gallon pool. Before we started, it was running at 42 gallons per minute as measured with TDH, 32 cents. This is in Simi Valley, I think it was. Monthly cost to maintain this pool with the original 1 horsepower pump as measured was $95 a month. Hypothetically, it dies, so we replace it with the like variable speed. Because the unions fit, it's easy peasy, you're off to the races, there's no programming, we just run it like the original 1 horse, and a month later, the electric bill went from 95 to 131. And there's your pissed off homeowner. What did you do? I thought this was this variable speed and all of that, okay? So the way to solve that, so that's an 18% increase, and this is all measured data. And so the thing to do was to slow this back down to the original 42 gallons a minute, because the pool was great. It was a DE filter, water quality was good, and so now we're not wasting as much money, but look, we're still $5 a month higher just because of that larger pump on that system. And so, and the technology of the motor versus permanent magnet, a lot of other factors. But at least per federal law and California code, we can get closer to that original 1 horsepower. But this is why people hate the variable speeds. But let me turn you into fan variable speeds, because you don't have a choice. So one of the things we could do with this is take it to a 24-hour runtime. So I still want to turn over, that was turning over that pool once per day, and it worked great. So let's just run it like a public pool and turn it over once. And look at this, man, we can reduce the electric bill by 90%. That's the affinity law. That's amazing. Wow. And it really works. 14 doesn't work so good. 14 gallons a minute will turn over that pool once in 24 hours. But now the skimmer's not working, your chlorinator's not, all the heaters won't work. So that's not really an option. It's a way to save energy, but that's not really the solution. So in this case, again, the example, and this is the pool before. So that's the 1 horsepower pump. This is a DE filter, and the pump's here. Then we go to the filter, and then we come back over here to the heater, and then out. So that's a mess of 2-inch pipe. And so what we did is cut it off. The only thing that didn't change was the heater. So the first thing relative to being the professionals, think about the safety and access, the pad layout, install once, used indefinitely, so take an extra couple of hours to think it through and get it right. This is about being the professional, not Mr. Acme. So then high efficient pads are massively quieter when programmed properly. So again, that's got to be the part of it. Do use heater bypasses. If you're going to this level, because when you're not using it, the heater has lots of little straws in it, right, that are copper, that you're going to tear it up. Do you ever have to shock pools? Yeah, you don't want that going through the heater. So putting in a bypass, $75, $100, whatever it costs, is a way better permanent solution to protect your heaters. And then in off season, you bypass them and close them off. Then you're protecting that big investment from when bad things happen in water chemistry. So again, it's all being part of being a professional. So here is that pad after the remodel. So you can see the pumps now on the left. We go through the heater, so it's laid out. Another aspect of it is we made sure the other pump was in here. You had to climb over stuff to get at the pump basket. So guess what never got cleaned?
Filter.
The pump basket. You couldn't get at it. So this is laid out where you can stand here to get at this particular filter. It's easy access to the pump, thinking through, and at the same time we get a lot of efficiency. Now, less pipe, and we went from hard elbows to sweep elbows. They're sort of, you have to use them here. They're a pain in the butt, but after you realize how good they are, performance is worth the time and effort. They look good, and they make a massive difference on hydraulic performance. So if we, access for pump and filter, safety, convenience, make it look like, we're going to set it up for performance, pump, filter, heater. So we're not going around and crazy. Well, we can't have the crazy part, but you can not go around. High efficiency pads are much quieter because they will move more water at a lower speed. And you don't have all the elbows and that kind of thing. So sweep elbows, popper pipe lengths. Now we did a retrofit here, so we only had so much room. Normally you would have more pipe length in front of this, so like we did here after. So, okay. So now let's look at after the install. So here was the original. This is our original 42 gallons a minute. Here is that new pump that was reinstalled. This is the pump curve. So you see these are shorter. They can't get to as high a flow. This one can, and so we measured the TDH here. It was 100. I think it was 49 TDH. And that gives us 132 gallons a minute at 2100 watts. Okay, so if you just install this and just run it full speed, like a single speed pump and program it, now you cost even more money. Okay, so it's really important that we program this stuff properly. So what we did is we slowed down the pump using the affinity law, and there's tools to do that. That's a different class. That's in programming. So what we did is we knew this pool was clear before at 42 gallons a minute. We replaced a DE filter with a cartridge filter that performs like a DE filter. So we're not giving up any performance. Might take a couple of hours longer to match DE. You know, DE is 90% efficient, this filter is 72. So it takes, you know, overnight to match what it was before. But by slowing this down, the high-speed watts was 2134, the low-speed watts was 69, and so we're at the same flow rate. We matched the turnover rate of the original, 7.7, because we didn't want too crazy a change on this. And so our daily, we went from 95 to 5. That's a 95% decrease. And then that can turn into the ROI on saying, instead of just replacing this pump, let's do the whole pad. I'll show you the before and after. The savings will pay for everything versus just doing the pump. So that pump and new filter and new pad will pay for everything. In this case, I don't think I have the summary slide. In this case, the ROI on this pool was 42 months. After all of that work, and that was the contractor profit and everything. So now it is capital, we're all in California, electric bills, you know, it's a little harder in Texas to get that in a few more years. Oh, here's the summary. So the cost originally was $95. That's our baseline, and our baseline to 95, we ended up at $517 a month. It was $45. And so, and this is the home stretch on this, and I'll have time to take pressure. So we think about programming this is if we look at a public pool sort of schedule, where it's a single speed pump, it's 2,300 watts for this particular pump, and it's a public pool or whatever, so it's gonna run 24, a rich residential pool. So they're running it, this was San Diego rates at 38. So the daily cost is $21, $22, or we're out at, you know, almost $700 a year. And so residents running 24/7, we're like, no, that's terrible, I want to slow it down. So what do? We run it in 8 hours a day, okay? And that's how we save money, that's good. So we're not 1/3 the cost. Oh, the savings, we can do this with a single speed, right? Mm-hmm. We have been for decades. And so when we do the math on this, doing this, it's 1/3 less, so now we're at 212. The problem is we've got 16 hours of the day where the water's not moving in the pool, and so the leaves that are landing sink, right? That's why they don't allow this for public pools. They have to keep moving. The other thing that's happened is when you turn off your pumps for 16 hours a day, even if you got 4 parts per million chlorine in the pool goes still. The stuff sinks, and the algae wanting to grow, that battle is always going on. That battle is fought in the hours, those 16 hours. The algae consumes the chlorine at the water interface. It's called the boundary layer. And now there's no chlorine for a fraction of an inch, and even though the pool's got 4 parts per million of chlorine, they continue to grow algae. They're growing algae in these time zones. So a way we can do this without boosting the electric costs, and I sort of missed it exactly, but if we go, where did I get it when I dropped it? I turned it off when I dropped it. Okay, there we go. So now what we're going to do is run it 2 hours on high speed, off for a while, very slow. We're going to filter, and this is just half speed. We can do way better than this. Run it faster for a while, then slow, then faster. Bottom line is we're going to run 24 hours a day, but we're not going to be running high speed the whole time. So we keep the skimmer working, we keep the algae from growing. And this is just based on half speed, half the flow. And that's proportional, that's a different class. So if we look at this at high speed, we're at 2,300 watts. Low speed, we're at 300 watts. And this is a single speed pump, or 2-speed pump that this was done. So now what we do is we're running the whole time. Let's look at this combined together. We're at $221, $222. I think the original was 13. And so the other thing is the other was 1 turnover a day. Because we're running continuously, we actually get almost 2 turns a day for the same amount of money. So we're going to filter more. We're going to skim continuously. We're going to run often enough to make the heater work or the chlorinator work. And yet we are not, we're massively reducing the cost, approximately 1/3. And we get rid of all of those problems. There's no downtime in the pool. And so just by taking time, whether it's your existing routes that have variable speed pumps on them, and you're the one who's buying the chlorine, and you're the one who's trying to chase algicides and all this other stuff to fight chlorine, and all these problems that are happening while your pump's off, just go reprogram them like this.
It's such a good point. People swim in a pool 8 hours like Steve showed. They turn off the pump after the pool party, right? You were there on Friday. Saturday they have another party. They turn on the pump. They turn it off when everybody leaves for 16 hours. Turn around and turn on the next. They're in yesterday's bathtub every day.
That's gross.
And then they call you on Tuesday and go, hey, you were here Friday and my pool's green. And your question is, what did you do? They had a party, turned it off, that water sits like he just showed. That sitting water, like we talked, you need 3 pillars. It's not filtering. Now it starts to get cloudy and they turn on, have the same kids, that's yesterday's bathtub. And you guys are pouring more water in there, than more chemicals in that, because they're not circulating the pool. Mm-hmm. So it's a great point to show, drop the speed, drop the flow, save the money, a little bit longer, saves them money, saves you money, and you don't have a screaming customer on Tuesday blaming you. Because you know you went there over the weekend when they weren't looking and jumped into their pool.
Yes.
You also have your pump priming up less.
True. Yeah, when you shut it down, yeah, so you pump, because it's always moving, you're not going to lose prime. Also, it's quiet. And the one thing that you could do is, you know, you could program this high speed for when the government or the, you know, they want you the cheaper rates, you know, get off of it and all of that. They tell us turn off the pumps during these peak demand. I was like, well, then you come and clean my pool. Right? And you could take these clear down to like a couple of light bulbs, old school light bulbs. You know, so it's enough that it's worth the investment in saving and chemicals. Part of maintaining this. By splitting this up, that issue aside, is by splitting this up, this comes from the in-floor cleaning world when we started dealing with the variable speed pumps, is the concept, and we wanted the best of both worlds, is so what we would do is run it for 2 hours. That's the cleaning cycle of the pop-up head. So stir it up, right? They send everything into, and then you run it and keep filtering. And then it's all going to slowly settle because we're not moving water fast, but we are moving it, so we're protecting the plaster and pebble and all of that stuff. And then about the time the stuff would start to want to settle again, because there's not enough to really turbocharge the skimmer or the cleaner, run it faster again. So you especially, and the other thing in the desert Southwest where I'm from, we get our afternoon breezes from the same prevailing direction. When the sun's starting to set, the hot air, cold air, whatever of the city, it comes in continually. I live in the desert. So we would get those afternoon breezes of blowing in the floaties and the sand. So that's when we make sure we program that pump to run fast enough, because it was my parents' pool, fixed income, so only fast enough to run the skimmer. And then once it calmed down at night, then we would slow it back down. If you're gonna heat it, you know, there's just all kinds of use cases. The point is, we have this amazing technology, there's amazing apps and poolside tech and all of this stuff, all these tools to use. And hopefully this would help elevate your game of being professional, so you're not just the Acme, do it yourself, replace a pump and leave. And if it's your route and you're buying the chemicals, I would definitely find out who your programmer is and say, okay, here's your project. We're gonna do at least one pool a week, or, you know, just start nibbling at it. And then look at how it's working and make adjustments. Then you do that, now you are super valuable to your customers, right? And then now it's not a race, well, I can get them for $80 a month, you're 120. You know, you want to be like JJ is like, no, I'm not 120 either, I'm 2200.
America.
Anything, thank you, this is, any, what'd you say?
America.
Oh. So, thank you, was this helpful? I sort of am the lab geek who lives in the weeds, and sometimes I get to share it.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a great show.
Thanks.
Thank you.